intro. Henry's in the intro. We did it. We're officially a trio. We're a team of three now. Welcome back to Nuts and Bolts Sports. Roger, Jordan, Henry here, as always, breaking down some more free agency. Feels like, 48 hours since we last spoke, and the entire world has just kind of burned down. The NBA world, let me say. Not the world itself. The NBA world has kind of burned down. A lot of moves, a lot of shakeups. It's interesting because, there's not a lot of big names, there's no LeBrons, there's no Durant's, none of those kind of names are shuffling around here in free agency, but these tiny moves that are sort of piling up on one another, and all these teams look like they've kind of been reshaped in a pretty dramatic way. So there's a lot to break into from that front, and let's kind of start with some of the bigger names here. Some of the bigger names that weren't discussed last time. Fred VanVleet obviously signing the 4-year extension with the Raptors, $85 million. Not going to New York here, as a lot of us kind of expected him to do. Gordon Hayward signing the 4-year, $120 million contract with Charlotte. Henry's sitting down there praying. I'm really happy about that. A couple other big names here, and some of these are smaller contracts, but I think they're quote-unquote bigger names. Tristan Thompson going to the Celtics as well. Marc Gasol going to the Lakers. There's been a lot of moves, and I kind of want to toss it to you, Jordan, first, because it feels like your team had the most traction in this offseason. Besides LeBron and eventually AD, almost your entire team is now completely different, and they're going to be trying to return that title back to LA. So how are you feeling with this offseason? Because I'll just say that I think the Lakers look better right now, at least on paper, than they did at the start of last season.
I agree. I think for right now it's free agency, so we get caught in the whole hype of everything on paper looks amazing. So I'm tempering my expectations a little bit, but I agree with you. They do. I mean, they made some great moves. Stealing Montrezl Harrell from the Clippers was shocking. First of all, no one saw that coming. And not only does it bring them the reigning Sixth Man of the Year, paired with Dennis Schroeder, who they traded for after the draft, who finished second in the Sixth Man of the Year voting. So they bolstered their bench. They also took him away from the Clippers, which is just like an extra, adding pouring salt in the wound, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. And then just a couple of other smart veteran moves. I mean, in that Dennis Schroeder trade, they get rid of Danny Green, who was aging very quickly, as we saw, and was being owed $15 million. And they replaced him with Wesley Matthews, who basically does the same. He's going to do the same position that Danny Green played, the same role, and is actually a little bit better percentage-wise last year with his three-point shooting. And they got him for a fourth of the price at $3.6 million. That was another steal. Adding Marc Gasol, who obviously his best years are behind him, but he's still very, very valuable on the defensive end. Him and LeBron are two of the highest IQ defensive players that we've had in this league, and so to put them on a team together, even in the late stage of Gasol's career, is a huge boost for them. They're able to negotiate with Caldwell Pope, who I have been known, along with a lot of Lakers fans, to give a lot of crap to back over the last year or so, but he did show up pretty big in the playoffs, especially in the finals. So good for him for getting, kind of a more contract security and a little bit of a bump in pay. And I think it was the other one they added. I mean, to bring back Marquise Morris was good too, just to kind of bolster the bench. So they really do have a 10-man lineup right now that I feel good about. I think we're still going to wait and see what the actual starting lineup is going to be. I think it's going to be whoever LeBron and AD really want to have out there with them, but they're going to have I think a deeper bench. They still have to go with Alex Caruso. He's not going anywhere. So I think they did a really good job. Pelinka and that front office have I don't want to say won the offseason, because I feel like there's still more deals to be done, but they're definitely up there.
Yeah, Henry, let's stick with the Lakers first. How do you feel as the resident Celtics fan? How do you feel about LA continuing to pad and bolster up their lineup there in the West?
I mean, I feel like we are in that stage where we look at everything on paper, and you look at the Lakers like they're having the best offseason. Jeannie Buss is doing an amazing job. Rob Pelinka, they're formulating what on paper looks like an already better team than last season. And I don't know if Jordan can push on that too. At least for me, it looks like that, because they're getting really. I forgot who said it, who tweeted it, but they're just getting professional basketball players. I know that sounds like a weird term, but if you think about it, these are professional ballers. When I think of Dennis Schroeder coming off the bench with Montrezl Harrell, and then just mixing in with Anthony Davis and LeBron, I'm like, it all meshes in so well, because none of them are ball dominant. They didn't really get players that they're looking for unnecessarily a big three, because they run through their duo of AD and LeBron. But now the thing that I'm a little bit conflicted about is minutes, like who's getting how many minutes, who's getting what minutes. Yesterday I did ask Jordan like who he thinks is going to be the starting point guard, and he says Alex Caruso, which is I can see that happening. But it's just Dennis Schroeder is very starter worthy as well. Maybe they can go, back and forth, throughout certain games and everything. But now that the NBA is doing kind of like an MLB type regular season play, maybe for one series that Cruz was going to start, and then another series Dennis Schroeder is going to start. I mean, they're interchangeable. I feel like the Lakers roster throughout is very interchangeable in terms of who they can start, who they can put in at what times. Montrezl Harrell is such a big. He just came off a 6-month year campaign with the Clippers, so to have him now coming off the bench for the Lakers, it's just I look at the Lakers offseason and I'm like, okay, they just one up themselves from last season already, and they're just coming off a championship, and this looks like an even more of a championship contender than last year. So it's just like this might solidify their back-to-back chances, but then other teams are getting stronger as well. Some teams are falling apart. Like the Clippers are kind of like, I don't know what's going on there. There's a lot of things going on there. But then when I look at the West, I do look at, Donovan Mitchell did get a max contract, and he's only going to get better. So these are the type of new players that the Lakers are going to have to worry about, if they do worry about him at all. I don't know, Jordan. Do you think they will?
I mean, it stinks too that again, like the Klay Thompson injuries. I think the Warriors are going to be very interesting. I don't know where they were going to land in the regular season, but like in a best out of 7 playoff series, it would have been interesting to see them healthy with Wiseman and however long he would have progressed. But obviously, that's kind of hit a little snag. I mean, the Clippers I think are still going to be good. We're still ragging on them obviously for like their playoff failures, but when they did get their like core guys didn't play a lot of time together last year, but when they did, they were very, very good. And I don't say unbeatable, but like they were much better than I think they showed. So even though they did lose Harrell, I think they have enough pieces there, and they still have Kawhi Leonard, who I think is one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world. That's always a big thing. Denver, you have Nikola Jokic and Murray, you think their chemistry is going to be better. They're both going to be better in different areas next year. Losing Jeremy Grant obviously hurts for them. But I think on the strength of those 2 guys alone, they can make any series interesting. So it's going to be the West is going to be competitive once again. James Harden and Westbrook don't seem to be going anywhere, at least for now. So Houston's going to be, I wouldn't say a threat to win the title, but they'll be like a pass. They're a team you have to deal with. Like you can't just, take a night off against them and expect to win. So it'll be interesting. As to your point with the lineup, like you said, it's going to be interesting how they structure the minutes, and then really the whole goal of the regular season is going to be to see what lineups produce the best. Right? They're going to be a lot of. I think they're going to be a lot of different starting lineups that you see Frank Vogel throw out there, depending on who's hurt, who's shooting well, who meshes well on defense, because that's what you want around LeBron and AD is you want these defensive 3-and-D guys that, because LeBron's getting older, his defense is probably not going to be better than it was last year. So you want to have someone to kind of help him out on the wing. You obviously have AD as your ultimate, like fail safe, protect the rim and take care of anybody, driving that way. But you want to have a guy like Marc Gasol out there with them. They have a lot of different options, and I'm excited because they're going to be able to play a bunch of different ways, right? If you want to go small and put AD at the 5 where he's still super, long and athletic, they can do that. If they play a team like Denver and Denver decides to stack up and they have like 3 or 4, 6, 9 guys in their lineup, guess what? Here comes Marc Gasol, AD's at the 4, LeBron's at the 3. That they can do. I think they're going to be able to do a bunch of different things, with those lineups, and they'll be mixing and matching all year.
When you focus on the lineups of the Lakers, there is certainly going to be a lot of experimentation because there's just so many new faces there. You want to see what's going to work. Mm-hmm. But if you're assuming that starting lineup, you have LeBron and AD obviously there. The rest of the pieces, we'll see how they fit in. But I imagine, like Jordan said, Gasol is probably going to be the starting center there. Mm-hmm. And what's really exciting about that is this Lakers team, wasn't always great defensively, I guess is the nice way to put it. But yeah, Gasol is a former defensive player of the year, and while he might not have the athleticism, he's never that athletic, but he's always bringing that intensity and that IQ on the defensive end, and that's something that he certainly has not lost. We were all convinced that he was going to Spain, and then this sort of under the radar signing here on the Lakers. I think he's like a perfect fit for that team because of that defensive presence, but also we forget because he's been such a dominant defender throughout his career that like he's one of the best playmaking big men that we've ever seen in the league. He's such a good playmaker, especially out of that high post where like LeBron likes to sit and AD likes to score from. Marc Gasol is just as talented a playmaker from that area as anybody else on the Lakers. So I think that's going to be a huge asset for this Lakers team because they are better shooter now. I think Wesley Matthews, especially that addition, he's going to be a really strong fit alongside LeBron and Gasol. And then coming off the bench, you have your 2 six men of the year basically. I thought Schroeder was going to win it. I'm surprised that Harrell won it, but between Schroeder and Harrell coming off the bench, like the pick and roll there is going to be pretty lethal. I think that's going to be really exciting to watch, and it gives this Lakers team a lot more presence off the bench as well than they had last season. So I think that this is I don't see anybody having even close to a chance of beating the Lakers, and we'll see how everything shakes up right now. But like on paper, I think the Lakers are far and away the best team going.
And I think too, honestly, the more I think about it and thinking about what lineups they've gone with in the past last year, I actually think that 4 of their 5 starting spots are probably solidified already because LeBron and AD are obviously out there. Yeah. With LeBron, they'll put him at the 3, but he's the de facto point guard. I think they've already said that they want to keep AD at the 4 as long as possible throughout the regular season. So I think you're absolutely right. I think Marc Gasol goes in at center there. Probably I don't even think Gasol will play more than like 28 minutes a game. Like you're going to see stretches where AD is at the 5, where Harrell can play a small ball center at the 5 if they play like Houston or something like that. But LeBron, AD, Marc Gasol, I think Caldwell Pope starts again. I think he fit in very well with the lineups that played a lot of minutes with LeBron last year. He obviously is good at spotting up at all different points around the perimeter and does a decent enough job on the defensive end. So I think it comes down to that last guard spot, which I think you're absolutely right too. Schroeder and Harrell are going to be coming off the bench. You want that almost it's like Lou Williams and Harrell, but Schroeder is probably he is much better I think at this point in his career. So they're going to keep that off the bench. So I think it'll come down to, do you start like another ball handler like Caruso, or do you keep him with Schroeder and kind of have those guys run the second unit while you have like Wesley Matthews, kind of like how it was Danny Green and Avery Bradley last year. Neither of them will be bringing the ball up the court or like running the offense, but I think Matthews has a better chance to start over Caruso, just because he fits that mold more of like just a strict 3-and-D guy. He can guard the other team's best guard for stretches, and then he'll be able to hit open shots from LeBron. And I think that's how it starts. But like Caruso is probably, I know I harp on him, for fun, but he and LeBron do play very well together. So I think there's a lot of time.
The plus minus duo.
It's LeBron. It's all LeBron's plus minus. It's not actually Caruso.
Caruso is just hopping on that coattail. So I think you'll see a lot of games where like that's their line of like Caldwell Pope, Matthews, LeBron, AD, and Marc Gasol, but like they'll finish the game with Caruso, Schroeder, LeBron, Harrell, and AD. Like that could easily be like their crunch time lineup. So you're going to see a lot of different things, but I do think at least the first 4 spots are solidified in that starting lineup.
Yeah, it's probably a pretty exciting time to be a Lakers fan. Coming off the coattails of a championship and then going into this offseason and having
it's lit, as the kids say.
Well, let's go into the Celtics now. Probably the team that looks the next most different beside the Lakers, and not all because of signings, but also because of pieces that they offloaded. Obviously, bringing in guys like Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague on pretty reasonable deals, I think, but also getting Hayward out of there. And we can kind of talk about Hayward and his ridiculous contract here in this same conversation. But I guess, Henry, how are you feeling about losing Hayward, the additions of some of these other guys, and what do you think about Hayward's ridiculous, insane? What's the right word to use here for Hayward's contract?
Not our problem. I think that's the best way to put it. It's not our problem anymore. That's something the Hornets, Michael Jordan, their whole staff is going to have to worry about now. Like I said, it's not their problem. This is what the Celtics needed, because I feel like now with Hayward out of the picture, we could have like a true revitalization of the Celtics. Now, we did sign a decent big, Tristan Thompson. He has playoff and championship pedigree, so to his credit, I know he was carried by LeBron, but he was still there. He still has all that experience in order to bring it to a young Celtics team as well, who desperately needs that type of experience. So signing Tristan Thompson, I wasn't fully against it, but I was like, okay, you know what? We're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere with all this. And then I saw the Jeff Teague signing, and I was like, okay. So now it kind of reminds me of when we got rid of Kyrie and P left Boston and everything, and the team got better. Yeah, we signed Kemba and everything, great regular season, but like everybody was like so like they were so torn between getting rid of Kyrie or keeping him. But it just goes to show that Danny Ainge always has a plan, and I believe in Danny Ainge. I think he's one of the best GMs in the league. Next to Rob Pelinka is doing an amazing job, but the Gordon Hayward contract, it just became a nuisance to the organization and to their cap space and what they could do in order to trade and get different types of players. It was Gordon Hayward's time was up, too injury prone as well, where he wasn't worth his contract, and he's not worth his contract anymore. Yeah, maybe a Utah Jazz version of Gordon Hayward is, which I actually saw highlights the other day, and I was like, if he played like that, the contract will be totally valid, but it's not anymore. And you know what? Like I think we talked about this, how there's just too many things out of his control, unfortunately, with the injuries that caught up to him. But at the end of the day, this is a business. Even Montrezl Harrell said it. He had a quote saying, this is a business decision for him. So at the end of the day, the players are going to make the best decisions for themselves, but ultimately the franchise is going to do the same thing. So all in all, not our problem.
Yeah, it's it's definitely the Hornets' problem because you do feel bad for Hayward to an extent because of all the injuries and the issues and whatnot, and it's just like this guy just can't catch a break. But at the same time, he's getting paid a ridiculous amount of money by Michael Jordan's team now, and it's just like you don't even feel bad for him at this point because it's like I understand you're coming off the injuries and whatnot, but you're still making this ridiculous contract there in Charlotte, and I don't quite understand what Charlotte is doing because you would imagine that they wanted LaMelo to kind of just develop as the primary scorer, playmaker, whatever you want to call him there in Charlotte. And Gordon Hayward is going to take half those possessions away from him because Gordon Hayward is primarily a scorer, I would say. And I think that stunts LaMelo's development. And now you can't really sign anybody else because you're just paying Gordon Hayward a ridiculous amount of money. So on that front, it makes no sense. But on Boston's front, it definitely does make sense because you offload Hayward's contract, you offload a player who's not playing all that well. He doesn't really fit the mold. You obviously have given Tatum also that crazy max extension as well. So that was a very smart move by Boston. But then as Cavs fans, we give Tristan Thompson a hard time because he was basically getting paid. He got it was a 5-year, $80 million contract to go out there and get offensive rebounds. But you're bringing him into Boston now on a $9 to $10 million a year contract. I think it was 2 years, 18, 19 million, if I'm not mistaken. You're bringing him in there on a reasonable contract to fill basically the same role because he hasn't really dropped off in play as even though the Cavs are not really contending in the past few years. Tristan Thompson was still doing. He was still out there doing the same thing alongside Kevin Love and Andre Drummond. So it's not like those guys came in there and took away those rebounds and took or hurt his role on that team. I know he missed some time over the past few seasons, and that was another thing that he was well known for, was being a sturdy player who had never missed games. Over the past couple seasons, he definitely did miss games. But I think for what you guys are paying Thompson, I think that addition is actually very, very smart, especially because we've talked about it plenty on this podcast. Boston has struggled in the sort of big man department after Al Horford left and Tice was not really fitting the role. I imagine that Tristan Thompson is going to be the starting center there next season. I guess we'll have to wait and see what Brad Stevens decides to do. I trust Brad Stevens with whatever decision he makes. But I think Boston overall had a pretty good weekend. What do you think, Jordan?
I think you're reaching with the Cavs were not really contending. I just want to make that clear. They were in no shape contending.
You're welcome for LeBron James.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that I said before we went on, I do like the Jeff Teague and Tristan Thompson additions. I think Roz makes a good point in that, for Thompson at that value around $9.5 million, that's a much better contract than obviously in terms of value of what he'll do for you. And same thing with Teague, obviously getting him on basically a vet minimum. But the Hayward thing, it stinks. I don't blame him for not being at the same level as he was when he was with Utah, because that all changed. We didn't necessarily know it, but it all changed 6 minutes into that first game against the Cavs when he had one of the worst ankle injuries we've ever seen. It's not his fault. I don't blame him for that. It was a freak thing. If you play that game 100 times, that happens once, and that was it. But what I don't understand is how Boston basically let him go. I know they were in trade discussions with Indiana. Hayward had made it clear that he wanted to go to Indiana. I think he had enrolled his kids in school in Indiana. He was hell-bent on going there. And I just don't see why they shouldn't have leveraged that and gotten something back. I know the deal potentially was Miles Turner and I think Doug McDermott. And I know Danny Ainge was angling to try and get Turner and Oladipo or Turner and TJ Warren or something. But to me, why would you in that situation, you're able to get off Gordon Hayward's, paying him all that money. You could have gotten back a serviceable starting center, Miles Turner, still done the Thompson deal because that's still your mid-level exception that you can use. And then you could have had another shooter and Doug McDermott or another piece that Indiana would have offered. Like, I know it wasn't the deal that Ainge wanted to do, but I think it's tough to, even though he cost so much money, to just lose Hayward as an asset like completely. I think was a little bit of a misplay, but they did rebound nicely. And like I said, adding those pieces there, you think Tatum and Brown are going to be, improving again. Obviously Tatum's, really close to that, like top 10, 12 players in the league. So they have that going for them. And I think Boston will be, very competitive this year. There's definitely a world where they win the East and lose to the Lakers in the final. So we'll see what they do there. If that happens, Henry and I just won't talk for like 2 weeks. But as for Hayward, I just think it's very telling in free agency, right? Free agency shows us who is about the money and who is about winning. And you have guys like on the Hawks, which we'll talk about.
Jeremy Grant, cough.
Yeah, you have like situations like that where you have like players like Daniil Gallinari taking a lot of money to go to the Hawks, and same thing with apparently Bogdanovich, who signed with them as well. That's them taking a lot of money, but also going to a situation where the Hawks are on the rise with the star player, like quote unquote star player, and you're trying to build a foundation to get to the playoffs and succeed. Going to Charlotte for $120 million, you're only doing that because it's $120 million, and I don't think there's any team that was going to sniff paying him that at all. And so shame on the Hornets, because as much as I'm not on the LaMelo Ball train, he's now handicapped with Terry Rozier, Devontae Graham, Gordon Hayward, who will be guaranteed to miss time again. And like just that's going to be their team for like 2 or 3 years because they're not going to be able to make any moves. He's not going to develop the right way. And the Hornets, certainly aren't going to sniff the playoffs. And not only did Michael Jordan is the best basketball player ever, no debate. But he is a terrible owner, and
I agree.
It's manifested in that way. That whole organization. I think Mitch Kupchak, who's a former Lakers GM, is down there making moves, and that's startling because I thought he was better than that. Not only did they sign Gordon Hayward for $30 million a year, mind you, Gordon Hayward has missed 121 games in the last 3 years. Again, not his fault, but that is a fact. That is a statistical fact that he missed that much time.
One game for every $1 million.
Literally. And so not only do you go and you sign yourself a guy who's guaranteed to probably miss time with all sorts of injuries and is not going to ever give you $30 million of value on the court, you did that. And in order to make room to do that, instead of finding a trade partner for Nicholas Batum and his $27 million contract, which was an expiring, I guarantee you, like, you could have flipped him to Oklahoma City for a first round, like with a first round pick. 100%. You would have found it. There's always somebody in the league willing to take on an expiring contract like that. And instead they waive him and stretch him. So now instead of either biting the bullet and paying him $27 million this year or trading him and getting off that, you are now paying him $9 million a year this year, next year, and the following year. That is dead cap. That would be dead cap that it's literally sitting there. So if by some luck they somehow have cap room, or they're being in a position where they could have some cap room to sign somebody, it is now gone. I don't understand how we have like the same like 6-7 teams be so dumb every year and make these like this isn't even like, this is no brainer. Like, why would you do? I don't get it. Like, I don't get the mindset of how these things aren't just made. Like, these decisions aren't made by one person, right? It's a whole front office staff. You have your scouts, you have your assistants, and everything like that. And you're telling me like that was the best idea that floated around the room, and no one's thought to speak up and be like, hey, like MJ, like sorry to interrupt, like your Jordan Brand thing here, but like that's an idiotic thing to do, and not just trade Batum. And how about we not give Gordon Hayward $30 million? Like, no one like thought to say that. I don't know. I don't get it. I would love to be a fly on the wall for some of those teams, just like the Pistons as well, who were just they apparently are just trying to go back to starting 4 centers. So I just, somebody made, I think it was Daryl Morey. I heard his quote that he said, as long as there's like 7 dumb teams in the NBA, he's always going to be fine, because you can always find somebody to, just outsmart and outwit, or some team's always going to be worse than you. So just shame on the Hornets.
It's why that franchise's ceiling has been like the 7 seed. That's as high as they've ever made it. It's like it's just right there. It's right there in front of us. We don't really need any more evidence to it. They just continue to make bad decisions. They don't draft well. They don't trade well. They don't sign well. They don't do anything well, and that's why their ceiling is so capped. Let's get into some of these other signings, and let's just kind of make it a free for all here and discuss whoever we want. And I alluded, yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I alluded to Jeremy Grant. I'll get to him in a second.
Okay.
We need to talk about the Cavs. The Cavs made moves, Jordan. You cannot insult the Cavs. Because of us, you got Marc Gasol because we took JaVale McGee off your hands.
Yeah,
You're welcome. You're welcome. Don't disrespect me on this podcast. And then the actual GOAT, not Caruso, but Matthew Dellavedova re-signed in Cleveland. Big day in Cleveland. I just wanted to get that off my chest. But now we can get into Jeremy Grant. Unless you have some words. You look like you were about to say.
The only thing I did want to say is like, not only, I think the reason I feel so good about the Lakers is not only did they make the moves that they signed guys, they traded for Schroeder, all this stuff. In the same weekend, I no longer have to see JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard uniform. When I say that I laughed out loud by myself in my room when I saw Dwight Howard he had signed, and then the tweet was deleted, and then it was like, oh, he's going to Philly. Like, when I saw that, I literally laughed out loud and texted my Sixer friends, not in a mean way. I didn't say, haha. I texted them. I said, when you guys get frustrated with him, I will be here. We can have, like, a therapy session. Like, people that have had to watch Dwight Howard, like, that'll be the name of our club. People who have had to watch Dwight Howard play on their team. Like, I'll come up with an acronym for it because it's going to be – that's him and Embiid in the same locker room. Oh, they're never going to get anything done. Yeah. So, yeah, I do thank the Cavs for taking JaVale McGee and still giving us, like, Jordan Bell and McKinney as well. Like, not that they're ever going to, like, play a lot, but, like, in a pinch, if we needed to start somebody, like Jordan Bell has played in an NBA Finals. Or Lonzo McKinney. Like, I can live with that in a pinch if, like, LeBron didn't want to play for a week and a half. Like, that's no big deal. But
Jordan's so happy with his offseason.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah. He really is. And Jordan, in our, not to out you here, Jordan, but in our like sort of massive group message, he said that he would personally drive Dwight Howard to the airport. To send him up to Philly.
Okay. I'll do it. I will fly to LA. I'll pay for a ticket to fly to LA now to go pick Dwight Howard up and drive him.
You'll drive him from LA to Philly if you really have to. I think you're not ready to get him.
That's like a 2.5 day drive. I'd be so sick of him. To put it politely, I'd be so sick of him. But yeah, there's been some other interesting deals. You know, the Jeremy Grant thing is very interesting. He was offered. So he was what, 3 years?
He 3 years, $60 million. He was matched by Denver. He decided to go to Detroit because he quote unquote wasn't going to have enough of a role in Denver behind Jokic and Murray. And it's just like it goes to what you're saying. Like, do you want to win, or do you want to take this selfish route of either having the ball in your hands all the time or getting paid? And Jeremy Grant went the selfish route. The Pistons, first off, are probably like the second or third most baffling team in this sort of free agency. I'm sorry, my camera's falling.
But so like, baffling that you can't even keep.
I can't keep things still. But the Grant decision, like for him to go to Detroit, I understand that he wants a bigger role, but Detroit's not the place to do that because you're gonna go out there and score 20 points a game, maybe win 30 games for the next couple seasons. What good is that going to do you for your personal development? Sure, you're getting a little bit more money, but Denver was going to give you that same money, so it doesn't even make sense on that front. He would have, the best way to sum it up was the tweet that I sent you guys where somebody said Jeremy Grant's going to soon realize how difficult it is to play basketball without Nikola Jokic by your side, and that's very much the truth, because the only reason Jeremy Grant one of the primary reasons why Jeremy Grant succeeded the way he did is because Murray was there to take some pressure off him, Jokic was there to take some pressure off him, and also give him the ball in the right places. You're not going to get that in Detroit alongside whoever the hell is still left there. So that decision is baffling. But also Denver, I think, is in a bit of trouble here. I know they signed Millsap back for 1 year, but Monte Morris' situation is a little bit up in the air as to whether or not he's actually going to return because they've got a whole plethora of guards now. There's a lot of weird things going on in Denver, and I'm definitely concerned. I know they got the trade exception because of the Grant deal. They're going to have the potential to sign another star around the deadline, hopefully, if not sooner. But we don't know what the situation is there. I know, obviously, Blake Griffin's name was in talks with Denver because of the whole Detroit situation. Whether or not they're going to be signed,
to be trading him, right?
Detroit has to be trading him because I don't understand.
You have Miles. You have what? Miles Plumlee. You have
Mason Plumlee.
So Mason Plumlee. Excuse me. Jaleel Okafor, Jeremy Grant. They drafted Isaiah Stewart. You already have Blake Griffin. It was so. When we talk about Charlotte and being one of the dumber teams, Detroit had a good draft, right? I think they took Killian Hayes was their pick, early, and I liked that. And Stewart was a guy who showed some promise, maybe down the line. And then they just totally play the weird card on us, and they just sign every big man available as if that's not how the league is anymore. And it's just baffling how they could take one step forward and 4 steps back. Even if they trade Blake, they still have a logjam at that position. And I don't know, exactly what the value is going to be. That's why you talked about, Griffin possibly going to Denver because I think John Hollinger pointed out that the contracts of Plumlee and Grant were like the perfect match for that. Although Denver has said that they're not doing it, but they have to be trading him because they have a lot of money tied up in a lot of people, and they're not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
But knowing the Pistons, I can see them not trading him because when we talk about these type of teams,
You're right.
I look at these teams and when I think of the Pistons, the Hornets, the Knicks, I think of a dysfunctional franchise.
Maybe the Cavs, throw them in there.
But the Cavs historically they've gotten Kyrie, they've gotten LeBron and everything.
Sure.
Right for the past 15 years, because I still remember Chauncey Billups and that era of the Pistons. But at least for the past 15 years, the Pistons have been making bad decision after bad decision. So right now their starting lineup comprises of who? Derrick Rose, Jahlil Okafor, Blake Griffin, Mason Plumlee, and Landry Shamet. They just keep signing oversized forwards that can't dribble. I think that's just a theme for the Pistons. So, like I said, dysfunctional franchise. I can see him not making a move with Blake Griffin and just again screwing up another season and becoming a 12 seed and wasting Blake Griffin's career again. I'm pretty sure Blake Griffin wants out at one point or at least this season or whatever. I can see him going to Denver. I feel like if he goes to Denver, that will be the best decision for the Pistons and for him. But it's just like what Jordan was saying. There's a group of grown men making these decisions in the front office, and they somehow
signing off on it and taking the advice of everybody else and being like, "Yep, that."
They're like,
hey, we have Okafor on the line for a couple million. Didn't we just sign like 3 other centers? Yeah, that's fine. Just, come on, bring him in. Like somebody is doing that, and that's
who's Detroit's GM? Does anybody know off the top of their head?
Whoever it is will not be the GM for long.
I feel bad for Dwayne Casey being handed this like weird mix of guys and like trying to do something with it. Like
whatever happens is not his fault.
That puts his job in jeopardy because he's like, what the hell do I do with this? Like Henry said, a bunch of bigs who don't really know how to dribble, who can't really space the floor.
Troy Weaver,
I don't even know who that is.
You're not gonna know because he'll be fired by the end of the year. I promise you. I'll put money on it now. He'll be fired at the end of the year. Those moves are bad.
Yeah, and I feel bad for Dwayne Casey because he's a good coach. So it's just like not only are you wasting the players' careers, but you're also wasting coaches' potentials as well. Because here's the thing: I'm pretty sure if you put Frank Vogel as the head coach of the Pistons, they're not gonna go nowhere. At the end of the day, you need talent. You need actual talent on the court. And Dwayne Casey is right. He got dealt the wrong card for him, especially because he is a very promising coach. And I think that's just unfair, just having a dysfunctional front office. And that's something that Jordan had to deal with the Lakers for the past 10 years.
We had the wrong boss running the show, and it was terrible.
And you can see
get directly, the players go out at the end of the day, and they have the biggest impact on the game because they're the ones out there doing it. But you can be set up for failure before the season even starts if you have a bad and incompetent front office, and that's what Detroit. Like you said, Dwayne Casey's a very solid coach. I remember when he got fired after winning Coach of the Year in Toronto because he couldn't beat the Cavs. But you can put Eric Spoelstra or Brad Stevens as the head coach of the Pistons, and there's nothing that they could do. Going Popovich doesn't matter. You could re-overhaul the whole system that they're playing, and those pieces just aren't going to work. So they're going to be. It'll be another long year. Speaking of Miami, I did want to touch on them. I thought they made some very smart moves. Obviously, bringing back Dragic and Leonard was kind of a loyalty thing, but they both have team options, so they're keeping their cap space looking good.
I'm a bit concerned that they lost Crowder.
Crowder will hurt, and that's a good pickup for the Suns. Good for them for adding. I think I could be talked into Phoenix as the 7th seed right now.
Yeah,
I can have that conversation. So good for them. Good for Devin Booker because he deserves to be in the playoffs and experience that. Mm-hmm. But I think Miami overall, they lost Jay Crowder. They brought in Mo Harkless, who is not Jay Crowder by any means, but is a serviceable 3-and-D guy who shoots the ball pretty well. They stole Avery Bradley from the Lakers. Jimmy convinced him and to come in there and play. I think he was very valuable for the Lakers last year. I think obviously we didn't see him in the playoffs because he had the situation with his daughter. So out of safety, he didn't go. But he's still very serviceable and pesky. They're going to have another year where they're going to have a lineup of Avery Bradley, Jimmy, Harkless, Bam, and some other defensive-minded player. And they're going to be their offense may fluctuate night to night, but their defense and their intensity are going to be there every single minute of the game, and they're going to be a pain in the butt to beat. So if Boston plays them in the East, semis or the East Finals, if the Cavs play them in a regular season game because they won't be in the playoffs, it's going to be a long 48 minutes playing that Miami team.
Can you hear him?
No, Raj, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that
It sounded really good, though.
we're burying the, we're burying the lead a little bit because this team went and made a good move in signing Serge Ibaka, but the Clippers also dropped $64 million over 4 years on Marcus Morris, and that might be the biggest travesty in this entire.
It's bad.
This is bad. That's really, really bad.
Serge Ibaka was a good signing. Serge Ibaka might fit them better than Montrezl Harrell just in terms of what he can do, spacing the floor and on defense. He makes up for what Harrell does badly. Mm-hmm. But then to just throw 64, like you're telling me that there is a difference between Marcus and his twin brother Marquis is $61.5 million. You're telling me that's the difference?
They're literally the same, if you ask me. They're literally the same.
No way. You know what the best part is? They have a joint bank account, and one of them is going to see $16 million put in it this year, and the other one's going to see $2.5 million. And guess what? Marquis is going to be spending the same way. Don't you? He's going to be like, "Yep, hey, it's our money, man, together." So yeah, that. I understand the loyalty and wanting to keep Morris because he does do a lot of good things for him. He was one of their better players in the playoffs, especially being a pick and pop guy at the 4. There's just what was the bidding war? Like who else was offering him? Like, was somebody offering him like $55 million? They had all throwing money at him, and they were like, "Well, we've got to match it."
They had all this money they were prepared to pay Harrell, I guess, and he went to the other locker room there in Staples Center, and they were like,
"That was your backup plan. Like that was your scramble." Like
what else would explain it? I don't there's no other explanation unless they imagined that they were going to sign one of these other big names and just nobody came knocking on their door and they were just like, shit, what do we do with all this money? And then Morris is like, I'm here, and then they're like, I guess
I'll take
Michael Green too. Who was a serviceable part. I think JaMychal Green was a good pickup for Denver.
Yeah,
I think they probably overpaid a little bit, but he's a pretty serviceable. He'll fill that Plumlee role.
He's like 2 years 15, right? He was like 2 years 15 or something. Okay.
2 years 15. So it's not bad. It's not a great contract. Like, maybe next year towards the end it may not be as valuable. Mm-hmm. And he's gonna fill the Plumlee spot. He's not gonna fill the role the same way because Plumlee has a very specific set of skills. But JaMychal Green does some good stuff. I think he'll help out. He'll help ease the loss of Plumlee and Grant. So good for him for making that decision. But I'm trying to think who else.
Denver's still got to make a move. They've got to make a trade or something here because there's no real free agents left that are worth going after. Denver has to make a move at some point in the first half of the season to get them.
I don't know what the trade would look like because we already talked about it. But whatever the trade would be for Blake Griffin, that doesn't include obviously Murray and Jokic are your untouchables. Mm-hmm. If you're not playing your best basketball, if you're Denver, midway through the year, whenever that new trade deadline is going to be. It's worth a swing.
It's gonna whatever trade they're ready to make is gonna center around Gary Harris and whatever additional pieces that maybe a Bol could be thrown in there and maybe some future draft picks or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I don't see Porter Jr. really being a trade asset unless you're in trade talks for Bradley Beal or something. And yeah, I guess you could also toss Millsap in there because he's only there on the 1 year deal. But I feel like Denver's got some loyalty towards him since he went and re-signed there after the talks with Portland picking up and whatnot. Yeah, so I don't really see that happening. So it's Gary Harris and whatever else you can attach to Gary Harris, and there's really not a lot. But if the Pistons are trying to offload Blake Griffin's contract, I don't really think that Blake Griffin's the best fit for this Denver team. I'm just throwing that as a hypothetical because I imagine him getting offloaded by the Pistons sooner rather than later. Yeah. It's still the defensive issue, and I wonder if this rookie Najee, I think was his name. I wonder if he's going to fill that role in an effective way. But there's still major gaps with that Jeremy Grant loss.
There'd be gaps. It would be. I'd be intrigued to see. Because Blake Griffin, one thing that he is the best thing that he's improved on over his career, besides his jumper, is his passing. I think he's very underrated. He's obviously not at the level of Nikola Jokic, but nobody is in terms of big men. But he's very serviceable, if not above serviceable, most times passing. I think he averages a career high 5 assists.
I'd compare him to Marc Gasol in the high post, actually.
Yeah, and so I could see a world where, yes, you're giving up the defensive side of it. But you could literally, if Murray's out of the game or whatever, you can have Blake Griffin, who's a reliable spot-up shooter now, especially from 3-point range, and you could have him. He's a good ball handler for his size as well. So I just imagine a world where they're running off screens with Murray, and then getting the ball, and he's catching an immediate screen from Jokic. Name me a defense other than the Lakers with LeBron and AD. If you had guys guarding Blake Griffin and Jokic, they're going to be generally probably slower, less athletic big guys. That would be difficult to stop in spurts. So it'd be interesting to see him again if it's not working out. If Denver is hovering around a little above 500 nearing the trade deadline, their only option is to take a swing. it would be worth it. Obviously, if they're playing well, you don't want to mess with their mojo. But it seems like he'll be the only guy, at least right now, because it seems like Wall and Beal are off the table, and then there's really nobody else that they probably Drew Holiday's obviously off the table too. So it'll be interesting to see what Denver does. I mean, you still have Jokic at the end of the day. I think that's you can still ride him pretty far if he takes that next step and really just asserts himself for say he plays 37 minutes a game. If he just asserts himself with 100% energy for 37 minutes a game, I think they can still be just as good because I don't think we've ever seen we haven't seen a lot of full games from Jokic. We see stretches where he just is unbelievable, and then you see him lollygagging on defense, throwing a fit after he gets we could see more growth from him in that aspect. When he commits to playing defense, the Denver was very, very good last year. When he didn't commit as their center, that's when they tended to struggle. So hopefully he takes that next step because he's one of the best players in the league.
That's where I actually see Blake being a good fit because I mentioned the defensive faults of that team. But if Blake is in there and Denver is still, they fight even against those teams that are better than them, quote unquote, better than them. They fight in those games. And it's when Jokic really goes out that the team falls apart. But if Blake Griffin can, he starts at the 4, he fills those backup 5 minutes for Jokic, or, he plays a similar role, at least where he's a playmaker. That offensive addition could be enough to keep them afloat. So that's where I see that being useful. We didn't talk about Van Vliet at all. 4-year, $85 million extension with the Raptors. Obviously not going. Great. Yeah, not really. Not biting on any of those additional teams that were going after him. Is anybody surprised by that?
No.
I was hearing the whispers of the Knicks, and I think the Knicks did come calling, but this was a situation. This is one of the very rare situations where you saw a guy get paid, but also pick the right winning situation for him, which obviously the Raptors, are going to be a better team than the Knicks are. So, good for him. He obviously, he earned it. He's undrafted, and now he's making, $85 million or whatever it is over 4 years. I think Toronto is really going to miss Ibaka and Marc Gasol because even though they were aging veterans, there were guys that were very high IQ defensive players that could space the floor. Obviously, we know about Gasol's passing, and Kyle Lowry's getting older. You still
people figured out Siakam in the postseason, and he's
that's the key. That's the key. What is his growth? Because he was exposed. Boston exposed him. They just swallowed him on every drive to the basket, every half spin back down. He basically had one move, and they were like, "Hey, he can only do this. Let's just guard him this way." So I'm interested to see. I have no doubt that he's not in the gym working on stuff throughout this year. So I expect him to come out playing better. So if he can take that next step, and I wouldn't call him obviously a superstar, but he's on that weird middle tier where I don't consider him even on the level of Tatum or somebody like that yet. So I need to see that out of him because it's him, it's Van Fleet and Lowry. Those are their big three. I don't know who they're going to be starting. I guess they'll have Chris. They have Boucher, right? Is that his name?
They re-signed him yesterday, I think.
Yeah. So they're going to be missing. They're not going to be good against guys on the interior. When they play the Lakers or the Nuggets or somebody like that, they're going to run into problems protecting the rim. But it is Nick Nurse. He does have a great system there. He's a very excellent coach, and they have most of their core back, and they're going to be a very difficult team to beat night to night. Even if they don't, I wouldn't consider them title contenders at this point. I think they'd be a tough out in the semifinals, the conference semifinals, but I don't consider them in the elite part of the East. I would have them as the 5 or 6 seed right now. But you never know what could happen if Siakam takes the next step and somebody else steps up as well.
Yeah, Henry, any names that we didn't mention yet that you wanted to throw out there, or even on the Van Fleet front, if you want to talk about that?
I just wanted to bring it back just a little bit, the whole John Wall situation, because it was reported first that he requested a trade. And then now it's a pattern that we see this offseason where they're like, wait, I never said that. And now that's backtracked. So apparently John Wall, quote unquote, is on the same wavelength as Bradley Beal, whatever that means, right? So if Washington, whatever that means, but if Washington or if the Wizards keep John Wall and Bradley Beal, and I've been seeing clips of John Wall playing pickup, he looks pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, is he worth his contract still? Probably now. We're gonna have to see in the regular season.
He was never worth that contract. I'll be completely honest with you.
John Wall,
people are. There's 4 guys in the league that would be worth that contract.
John Wall fully healthy is a top 5 point guard in the league.
I'd question that. I don't know about that one.
Especially
I gotta see the jumper. I gotta see how the jumper is because
it was never there.
Even at his peak, when he was 18 and 9 a game, and was, I agree with you, one of the 5 best point guards in the league for like a 2-year stretch. He never had that jumper, and that really hurt him because we got to the playoffs. He'd be shooting like 40% from the field. Teams would back off of him and attach themselves to other shooters like Bradley Beal or, when they had Paul Pierce and all those other guys there. So he does have a big weakness in that. And plus, he's coming off the Achilles, correct?
He had 2 different injuries.
Right.
He's
coming off of 2 major. I think it was like an ACL and an Achilles or something like that.
That's what I think it was. Yeah.
He's coming off of 2 major leg injuries, and his biggest asset was always his speed. Right, he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest, guys in the league. So I need to see how that looks, and if he's not as fast as he once was, which I suspect is going to be the case. How does he compensate? How does he adjust? Because that's the hardest part is when these guys come back from these big injuries and they try to be their old self again and do the same things, and they're not physically able to. Some guys can recognize it and adjust and transition to a different style of playing that allows them to still be effective. And some guys try to just force their way back into their old, style of playing, and it ends up being a detriment to the team. So that'll be interesting to see. What they can do, because he's a very good defender as well. He was making all NBA teams, and he was a good pickpocket. So that they've it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, Bradley Beal is going to be their ace moving forward. But they gave Bertans 5 years, $80 million. Whew. I mean, I like Bertans. Like, consider me a fan. He's a sniper. He's this classic Spurs player. He came over from Europe and just started lighting it up, and then got paid. But man, $80 million, like that's a lot of money, and you're already committing all the money to Beal and Wall. That contract in like 2 years could look really bad.
Washington falls into that Charlotte, New York, Cleveland, Detroit.
Yeah, not as bad.
Yeah,
they're really smart enough to draft Wall and Beal. Like, good for them. Right there. But that could be rough. That could be another rough year for Wizards fans. So, Joe, if you're watching, I'm sorry in advance. Like, I think you guys have been officially eliminated from the playoffs, along with the Cavs and the Knicks, and maybe 1 or 2, maybe Charlotte definitely as well. Do we want to talk about Milwaukee real quick? Because I thought, we obviously had the whole Bogdanovich fiasco, which blew up in their face. They still did the Drew Holiday deal, but I thought they rebounded, like, for what they, on the fly with not a lot of money. Like, signing, obviously bringing back Compton, who was a part of their bench, bringing in DJ Augustine, who's a crafty veteran, who killed the Raptors 2 years ago in the playoffs. They brought in Bobby Portis, who has a lot of holes in his game and a lot of flaws, but has some all-natural talent and could give him some flexibility at the 4 or 5. And then even stealing Torrey Craig over from Denver, who was a serviceable player for them. I thought they didn't make any like moves that say, oh, they're going to, be the favorites to win the title or come out of the East, but like for what their situation was and having to do it on the fly with not a lot of money, they could have done a lot worse. And I think they at least have some serviceable pieces around Giannis. But it'll be interesting to see where do you think they can finish, next year with this roster right now?
Go for it, Henry.
I mean, it's always up in the air. Why? Because of Mike Budenholzer and his system. I think we talked about already how it's super flawed, where he's going to take out his best players at the wrong times. And if he keeps doing that, then inevitably the Bucks are going to be led to failure. It just really depends if there's a system change, if he's going to be able to really use all of Giannis's potential in terms of playing 35 plus minutes and not restricting him to 30 minutes. Because the only time I've seen an MVP caliber player play 30 minutes or less was Steph Curry back in 2016, but that was because by the end of the third quarter, they're blowing teams out by like 25 or 30. So, there's a reason to pull them out. But the Bucks, yes, great regular season team, but they just still have a lot more to prove. And if Mike Budenholzer doesn't change up his style of coaching and just what his decision making for him, Chris Middleton, because like I said, Chris Middleton showed out in that I think it was game 4 or game 5 against the Heat. He really showed no Giannis at hand. So it was Chris Middleton playing more minutes than usual, 16 minutes more, actually, exactly. And it showed out. It was like, wow, who would have known that if I left out my best players out there for a longer period of time, which they can because they're in their prime, that good things will come out of it. Now he just got to realize that and just stretch that throughout the whole season. And obviously, you can vary it. If you're playing against the Pistons or whatever like that, like that's when your bench comes in, or Drew Holiday can even take over that game. But I feel like it's going to take a whole system change for the Bucks to take that next step, because, like I said, they have the potential. They have the freaking MVP by all means. So that, or they just get rid of Mike Budenholzer. Probably.
I don't see any of those additional moves moving the needle. I think the Drew Holiday move is enough, though, to keep them atop of the East. And we talk about Budenholzer, but the thing is his team still do well in the regular season. So we'll see what happens in the playoffs, but they'll probably still be the one, maybe the 2 seed in the East, but probably still the 1 seed. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. I think Budenholzer, he is certainly stubborn because he doesn't want to play his stars more minutes, but if he's a smart coach, which I think he very much is, he will make that adjustment this upcoming season. And I imagine that he'll learn from his mistakes, go into because I think he really is one of the best coaches in the league. I don't think there's any denying that. And he's stubborn, and that's why his team fell apart. If he opens up his mind and he's willing to play those guys more minutes, they'll be fine. If he's not, then yeah, he deserves to be ousted from there.
If he makes the same, and again, I say this every time we have the Budenholzer conversation, the strategy for the regular season works. I think it's very smart. It keeps Giannis and Middleton, and now it'll keep Drew Holiday fresh going into the playoffs. No one's going to be super fatigued. It lowers the risk of injury, all that kind of stuff. I think it's a very good idea. But if he pulls the same stuff in the playoffs again, I mean, it's a crime. It's just wrong, and he should be fired. And Giannis should leave and ask out. And like that's just, again, imagine that happening to LeBron when he was younger, Kobe, Shaq, all those guys. Like, they were just out there and they played because it gives you the best chance to win. So you have to, I'm okay with Giannis playing 31 minutes a game in the regular season, but playoff time, him, Middleton, and Drew, everybody needs to be 37, 38 minutes minimum. Giannis, realistically, given his physical freakness and his ability, the fact that he's squarely in his prime, should be like 40, 41 minutes a game, because you really don't want him sitting ever, because everything goes through him on offense, and he's such an impactful defensive player as well. But can we say it is weird? He didn't do the Supermax yet. He hasn't officially said it. I think the Bucks didn't make the moves without like getting that agreement, I think, behind closed doors. And they are showing good faith and trying to bolster the team. But do we talk about the rumor where it's like AD's waiting to sign to see if Giannis will sign, and then maybe they could sign 1-on-1s and opt out, and then they can recruit Giannis to LA next year? Is that a thing?
No, Giannis is not going to LA. He's not going to LA.
We do Giannis and AD pick and rolls for like 4 years, and they just throw alley oops on every play, and nobody can stop it because no one's tall enough. And that's a
Windhorse rumor. I'm not putting any stock behind it.
I know, but it's just like, I know it would never happen, and I'd actually be uncomfortable having like all 3 of those guys in the same teams. I don't think that's very fair, or like how the league should be run. You want the parity. But man, LeBron would average I think LeBron would average 20 assists a game.
Yeah,
he would get one pick and roll, pocket pass. Just that's how it would be. But it'll be interesting. I think the Bucks, I agree, they'll be a 1 or 2 seed along. I think Miami's going to be competitive. I still have some Philly stock. I don't know why. I don't. You guys know me. I'm not a Philly person.
Just because they made a shift, so there's you're expecting something different.
It's the classic shift. It's like, we brought in Doc Rivers. It's going to be a new culture. And, they added Dwight Howard and all that other fun stuff. But Philly, I think, will be like more of a 3 range. Boston will be up there in the 2 to 3 range. I don't know if they have enough to be the 1 seed, but they will be up there in the top.
If Tatum makes the leap, I think they could be the 1 seed.
They could. They definitely could. Like I could be talked into it. So I definitely think the Heat, the Bucks, and the Celtics would be like my locks for like at least being in the home court side of things. And from there, it's like Philly could be 4. You don't know what Toronto's going to do. We don't know what Indiana's going to do. I think I'm like I'm missing anybody else, but those are the main ones.
That's the entire Eastern Conference.
Then it falls off. Then there's the Cavs and the Knicks and everybody. But it'll be interesting. It'll be the East will be very top heavy again. It'll be like, oh wow, these 3 or 4 teams, they might have better winning percentages than any team in the West, because that's how it was last year. But come playoff time, obviously the West is going to be a much deeper conference.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, Henry?
No. I mean, I feel like we tackled all the topics. I was going to bring something up. It's just like, I think we can save it for next episode. I was just like, okay, now we're pretty deep into the offseason and trades and free agencies and everything. I was just going to ask for your guys' top 5 teams moving or like heading into the 2021 season. But that's something we can do probably next episode.
Yeah, we'll do more in depth once we've had all the signings, and then we can actually sit down. 'Cause I feel like I need to look at everyone's roster.
Yeah,
I'm looking on a screen like where all the guys signed for how much money, but like until I like actually sit down and break it down. But I will say the Hawks, I think, are moving in the right direction. They are surrounding. We didn't really talk about them, but they are surrounding Trae Young with winnable players. You have Gallinari is going to be a perfect stretch for. You have Bogdanovich, assuming the Kings don't match. I don't think they will.
They're not. They're not.
We want to trade him for the Lakers, in which case, please, let's do it. But like you have like a lot of shooting around him. You have some playmaking. You have Capella and Collins and those guys. So that I don't think they're going to be obviously contending at least this year, but they definitely can make the right moves. I can definitely be talking to them as like the 7 or 8 seed, which even though you might get bounced 4-0 in round 1, it's a step in the right direction. It gives those guys some playoff experience, which is I think the most invaluable thing that we never talk about. So good for them. Kudos to their front office. I know they have some guys who used to be in the Warriors front office, and it shows kind of their IQ level. So look out for the Hawks to be a much more competitive team next year.
Consensus from today's episode, everybody will be below the Cavs. That'll bring us to a close for this episode. Thanks everybody for joining us. Be sure to check out our merch store, teamnbsmerch.com or bonfire / where's the link, Jordan? Where's the link? Where's the link?
I didn't grab the link today.
Go to Bonfire and search Nuts and Bolts Sports. Also go back to Wednesday, watch our live stream from the draft if you're interested in hearing us talk about. We had the baseline guys on it. We had Marcus, MTC with Mook talking about every guy basically that was drafted in the first round. So that was a lot of fun. And we'll be back here on a regularly scheduled time. So